How's it going, Fuel for Life Nation? I want to talk to you today about the 5 books that will make you become a better person. I read all of these books and they're incredible. And what I'm actually going to do is I would like to give these books away to you. So the 5 books that I'm going to talk about today, I'm actually going to give them away. And so as you're watching this video or you're listening to the podcast, if you'd like to get one of these books, here's all you got to do. Go to iTunes and leave a review of the Fuel for Life podcast and DM me on Instagram or somewhere on social media, and I will send you one of these books absolutely free of charge. So let's get started. The first book I want to show you guys is Jordan Peterson, 12 Rules for Life. So as you can see, it's a pretty thick book and it is very lengthy, and but it's an excellent book. It's a really, really good book. The book title is 12 Rules for Life, an Antidote to Chaos. Now, a couple words about Jordan Peterson. Most likely, if you're on social media, you have heard about him. He's a Canadian professor, and he went viral. His YouTube videos have millions and millions of views. Pretty much every single person I know has heard about him. And the reason is because he struck a chord with specifically the demographic of young men so that they can basically get their act together and start living a life with purpose. Now, Jordan Peterson doesn't distinctly call himself a Christian or a Jesus follower, but many of his teaching is very similar to it. And so I picked up the book, I read it, and by the way, this book that he wrote, it's called 12 Rules for Life, and he's actually coming out with another book next year. So if you're a Jordan Peterson fanatic and you can't get enough of him, you'll be pleased to know that he's coming out with a second book next year. It's going to be called 12 More Rules for Life Beyond Mere Order. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually read a quote from this book, and I want to share it with you guys, and hopefully it'll change your mind about the way you kind of think about stuff. And I'm also going to comment and pontificate a little bit about what I think about it. So here's the quote from Antidote to Chaos by Jordan Peterson. He says, "To stand up straight with your shoulders back is to accept the terrible responsibility of life with eyes wide open." So he's calling basically men to make sure that they're doing a lot of, they're creating purpose in society. They're fulfilling the goal that they've been created for. It means deciding to voluntarily transform the chaos of potential into the realities of habitable order. It means adopting the burden of self-conscious vulnerability and accepting the end of the unconscious paradise of childhood, where finitude and mortality are only dimly comprehended. It means willingly undertaking the sacrifices necessary to generate a productive and meaningful reality. It means acting to please God in the ancient language. So, book is great message, a lengthy read, but nevertheless very important read. You can pretty much jump into any chapter you want. This is basically what I'm gonna say. When I heard about Jordan Peterson, I started watching some of his YouTube videos, got the book. The ideas are excellent, but I was a little bit surprised at how many people thought that these ideas were so incredibly revolutionary. And the ideas were basically like, look, once you're born, make sure you do the right thing. You obey your parents, so you listen to your parents, you get a job, you work hard, you get married, you pursue your future wife, you take care of your household, you become a very important part and a person in society, you become influential, you're not doing stupid stuff that's going to cause damage or destruction to other people. Work hard, keep your head down, and be influential. Okay, awesome, great. The thing is, though, if I come from an Eastern European background, specifically a Slavic background, that was the only message we ever heard growing up. When we immigrated to the United States in 1992 from the former Soviet Union, Yeah, we got some government assistance for the first year or so, but immediately my dad, he started working, then he opened up his own business, he opened up his own company, he provided for his family, he taught me exactly the same kinds of principles. So I literally was in an environment where those principles were taught to take care of your family, to provide for your family, to be an influential part of society. And maybe that's partly the reason my life turned out the way that it turned out. And God's grace had a lot to do with that. And so I do love this book, and I do love that in our society, there's a resurgence for young men to get their act together, to basically become influential in society and to take care of their wives and to take care of their children and to do good work and to open up businesses and do all of that. I love all of that. So whether that's Jordan Peterson telling people to do that, or a pastor telling people to do that, or another book, if you're moving in the right direction, that's awesome. So my only thing with this book is that this is a message that was pretty normal. If you grew up in a normal household, and not even if you grew up in a normal household, if you just pay attention to what the Bible says and you do what the Bible says to do, you'll be fine. But if it takes a particular, maybe sort of a semi-spiritual secular author to write about it and for this book to go viral, I'm all for that. I'm all for men to pretty much do exactly what they need to do. And I think it's just for men. The book is for men, for women, for anybody who wants to grow and who basically wants to change their life. So 12 Rules for Life, an Antidote to Chaos by Jordan Peterson. That's the first book that I recommend for you guys that I read, and I highly recommend it to you. You can click the link in the notes of this video, and you can buy this book for yourself. Second book that I want to talk about today is called The Last Arrow by Erwin McManus. Erwin is a pastor of a large church called Mosaic, very close to where I live. He's in LA. I'm in Orange County. And I actually had a great conversation with Erwin a few months ago when I checked out one of their campuses that they're launching in Orange County. We talked about church planting. It was a great convo. This is a book that I highly recommend to you if you want to get deeply inspired and deeply moved and deeply motivated to make drastic, radical changes in your life. I read this book basically in one day on the first day of 2018. So we went away to a cabin. I was there. I bought the book and I read it in one day. It's a fairly easy read. And I'm going to share with you guys a quote from The Last Arrow. So basically the subtitle of the book is Save Nothing for the Next Life. Basically, Erwin is talking about die empty, die spent, do everything that God has called you to do, and reject mediocrity at all costs. So here's a quote that I personally really like, that personally impacted me greatly. And here's what it says. I wonder how many victories are lost before the battle has ever begun. I wonder how much more good God desires to usher into the world that has been thwarted by our own lack of ambition. I wonder how many times in my own life I thought I failed, but actually the only thing that happened was that I quit. So as you can see in this book, The Last Arrow, literally every single line is tweetable. Every single line you can share on social media. It's just incredible. I want to share with you guys a second quote that I really liked. It says this: we must shoot the arrow and recognize that there are things outside our control, and we must strike the arrow and take responsibility for what is in our control. We are to shoot and strike, but what we are not to do is stop. So this book is all about going all in. Even on the back of it, as I'm reading it, it says, before you die, live the life you were born to live. So this is like, imagine a very cinematic, epic scene out of a movie. Conquerors, warriors, like experiencing victory. This is the book for you. If this is not 12 Rules for Life, okay? It's not. Now, there's a particular demographic that would rather read 12 Rules for Life and they pick up this book, which is significantly smaller in size, and they're like, oh, okay, maybe they might say, well, it's super kind of like a lot of platitudes or kind of like rah, cheer you on kind of message. Well, what I would say is you actually need that sometimes. And in my particular case, when 2018 began, this is exactly what I needed to read. So this is a really, really good book. It's a very short book. You can literally read it in a couple hours. And what I really love about it is that it's telling you to go all in. So if you're going to start a business, go all in. If you're going to church plant, go all in. If you're going to start a family, if you're going to love your wife, whatever you're doing, just do it with all your heart and all of your might. So Save the Last Arrow by Erwin McManus. Excellent book. Pick it up and read it. I got a link for it in the notes on this video. Third book I want to share with you guys that really impacted me deeply and changed my life. It's called Divine Direction by Craig Groeschel. Now, let me tell you something. Leaders are readers and readers are leaders. If you're not reading, you're not leading. And if you're not constantly reading or listening to like really good content, you're probably not growing as a leader. And I'm going to tell you something. You must subscribe to Craig Groeschel's podcast on iTunes. It's a leadership podcast. It's excellent. All of Craig Groeschel's books are really good. This one in specific was really good because here's the way that it impacted me, because it talked about that small decisions you make every single day are actually going to make up the substance of your life. And so here is the quote from Craig Groeschel's book that I'm also recommending. It's called Divine Direction. Here's the quote. Direction, not intention, determines destination. If you want to take aim at the story you want to tell, you have to make small life-changing choices and then act on them daily. The best decision you can make is always the next one. Each decision should move you closer to becoming all that God made you to be, to turn your life in the direction of a story you'll be happy to share. Most people look at others who are successful and figure out they probably made just a handful of big, really important decisions. But the opposite is true. It's the small choices no one sees that result in the big impact everyone wants. And I want to focus on that last line. That's really true, because waking up early to exercise or to write a book that you've been wanting to write or to start a new business, and you're waking up at 3 or 4 in the morning, nobody sees that. Nobody sees when you're working 120 hours a week. Nobody sees when you're maybe helping somebody. Nobody sees you when you're raising your children and you're being a good dad or a good mom. Nobody sees that. But Craig Groeschel is basically saying that it's those seemingly small, very obscure decisions that you make that create the big changes in your life. And so this basically is a book where Craig, he's a pastor of Life Church. I think it's the biggest church in America. This is he shares a lot of his story. If you only have known Craig Groeschel as just as a leadership guru or somebody who just puts out a leadership podcast and is a pastor of a church, he actually talks about how he came to faith in this book, and he basically talks about his college years and how he got married. So you get to know the personal side of him as well. Master the decisions that will make your life everything God wants it to be. So if you've been making a ton of poor decisions lately, or you kind of want to see, well, how can I change my life? What direction I need to go? Divine Direction. That's the book you got to read by Craig Groeschel. Okay. The fourth book I'm going to recommend to you guys that I read in 2018 that really impacted me is called Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. Excellent author, excellent book. If you think you don't have an ego, let me tell you, you do. That's why you don't think you have one, okay? So this is going to be a really, really good book to help you conquer that. And I'm going to read a quote from this particular book as well that I think was really, really good. So check this out. An amateur is defensive. The professional finds learning and even occasionally being shown up to be enjoyable. They like being challenged and humbled and engage in education as an ongoing and endless process. And this book, it's a super short book, super easy read. And again, I'm going to read a second quote from it that I think was really, really good. Ryan says this: you know that all things require work and that work might be quite difficult. But do you really understand? Do you have any idea just how much work there's going to be? Not work until you get your big break, not work until you make a name for yourself, but work, work, work forever and ever. Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. I don't think that Ryan is, I'm not sure what his spiritual condition is. However, I think this is a book that everybody needs to read because it talks a lot about pride. So even he kind of uses some biblical language in the book. So basically, be killing pride, or pride will be killing you. Sort of, that's the gist of it. And what I would say about this book is that you need to be not afraid to create something new, like write a book, start a podcast, start a church, or start a business, or whatever you want to start. And you need to be okay with the criticism that you're going to get. And the reason I like this book a lot is because it talks about that you're not done. You've never arrived. You still have to work at your craft and at your art. And what I will say is the reason that this book really resonated with me, especially the quote that I read, is that I love work. I love the process of work, regardless of what I'm doing, recording a podcast, writing a sermon, business, church, like helping people out, whatever, every sphere of life that I'm interested in. I love working. In fact, for me, work is a form of rest. When I do go on vacations, rarely as that is, it's really hard for me to unplug. And I understand it's all about taking a Sabbath and recharging, and I totally get that, and I do that. But I guess the reason the book resonated with me is because I love working and I love the process. So my recommendation is read the book and then find something you love doing and fall in love not with the result, but with the process, okay? And you'll do great. So this is a really, really good book that will basically take a surgeon's scalpel and cut you up, but in a very, very good way. Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. Highly recommend it. The fifth book that I want to recommend to you guys to read that I read this past year is Counterfeit Gods by Tim Keller. And the subtitle is The Empty Promises of Money, Sex, and Power, and the Only Hope That Matters. This is actually a book that my men's group at the church I pastor, we read this book together in 2018. It's an excellent book. It talks about the fact that your heart is an idol factory and that the three biggest gods, money, power, and sex, no matter how much of those you will have, they will leave you empty if you do not have Jesus Christ in your life. And so I'm going to share with you guys three quotes from it because this book is incredible. By the way, any book by Timothy Keller is incredible. Go Google it, Amazon it. All the links for this book are right in the video here below. So here's the quote I want to read to you guys. According to the Bible, idolaters do three things with their idols. They love them, they trust them, and they obey them. So the way that I define idolatry or idols, and Tim Keller defines it similarly, is that whatever your mind effortlessly drifts towards when it's on idol mode, that's pretty much your idol. Here's the second quote. When you pray and work for something and you don't get it and you respond with explosive anger or deep despair, then you may have found your real God. So what makes you angry? What makes you sad? That might be your real God. And here's the third quote. I really love this one. He says, when anything in life is an absolute requirement for your happiness and self-worth, it is essentially an idol, something you are actually worshiping. When such a thing is threatened, your anger is absolute. Your anger is actually the way the idol keeps you in its service, in its chains. Therefore, if you find that despite all the efforts to forgive, your anger and bitterness cannot subside, you may need to look deeper and ask, what am I defending? What is so important that I cannot live without? It may be that until some inordinate desire is identified and confronted, you will not be able to master your anger. So this book, Counterfeit Gods, it basically talks about all the different things that we substitute in our life, and we seek those things instead of Jesus Christ. And so Tim Keller very eloquently, very simply as well, explains to us how we can uproot the idols in our life and replace them with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Then, only then, we'll be much more happier and joyous in our life. So, Counterfeit Gods by Tim Keller, highly, highly recommend this book as well.